Let me share a quick reflection. In the early 2000s, Nokia led the mobile market, but it fell fast, unable to adapt to the smartphone revolution. The lesson? Without vision and reinvention, even giants can fall. Now think about this. Where will your company be a year from now if you adopt AI today? At MexMoves, we're seeing real examples. Mexican companies combining their data with top AI models and getting results. A big consumer goods firm is saving hundreds of hours by automating orders and stock planning. A well-known retailer now uses AI agents as control towers, generating reports across all its stores and warehouses. What do they have in common? Arcam, a Mexican-built AI and data platform developed by a world-class team. Imagine a ChatGPT-style tool trained on your company's data. Fast, accurate, reliable. That's what Arcam delivers. Data integration, decision-making with real metrics, and tailored AI for real operational solutions. What would Nokia's story be with a tool like this? More importantly, what will your company's story be if you adopt AI today? Request your demo at arcam.tech/whitepaper.
Welcome to Mex Moves, our weekly podcast on Mexico business and finance. How are you, Eduardo?
Doing well, Damien. How are you?
Very well. So this week we're speaking with Eduardo Verboonen Khoury. Eduardo is the co-president of Hospitales MAC, one of Mexico's fastest growing private hospital groups. He's going to chat on rising demand from Mexico's upper middle class for private hospital, and also the growing trend of Americans coming to Mexico to get affordable, high quality care. Given how expensive it can be in the US if you don't have the full insurance. And then we'll chat about a big IPO this week, first IPO in a long time in Mexico, the Fibra NEXT IPO. Some press reports about Iberdrola leaving Mexico, selling its renewable assets, having sold its non-renewables last year, and then a brief look at corporate earnings for the second quarter, some Pemex refinancing and the Nissan plant closure in Cuernavaca in particular. Eduardo, on the Fibra Next, what did you make of that IPO? Maybe just fill us in on the key data points.
First of all, it's happened, which is already a bright point, if you ask me, because this Fibra had been meant to come out last year, if I'm not wrong. It didn't raise as much as it was originally intended, but it still raised about $450 million. And it does show that there is appetite for industrial parks, because this is the spin-off, or not necessarily a spin-off, but it will include assets used for industrial plants and industrial parks. So it does show that despite some of the concerns that have emerged because of the Trump tariffs and internal decisions that the Mexican government has made, there is still apparently appetite or demand for these places where companies can set up shop and set up plants or distribution centers and go on and sell to America, mainly, I would suspect. So I think it's a good sign. They will do a follow-on later on to raise a little bit more capital. It's so much welcome news for the IPO market in Mexico, even though it's not a plain vanilla company, but it's a REIT or a Fibra. It does bring back alive a little bit of the Mexican stock exchange. What was your take, Damien?
Well, as you said, it is an IPO that's been delayed for a couple of years now. So great, that it finally happened. I think it's the first IPO in Latin America since March 2024, so in more than a year. There's also been a drought in Brazil. It's the first kind of Reg S 144A, basically internationally regulated sort of IPO in Mexico in more than 5 years. The last one was in March 2018. It's the largest real estate IPO in Latin America for a decade, and it's the first real estate offering this year. So there's a lot of different milestones that make it good. As you mentioned, it's at the low end. They got 8 billion pesos, and the range was 8 to 10. So clearly, demand wasn't that strong as they would have been above the lower end. And I think that the main reason for that was that it's not going to begin with, at least, it's not going to be liquid. It's priced at 100 pesos per CBFI per unit, and that was fixed. And the idea is, as I understand it, in the first stage, they've got all of the properties are not coming from Fibra Uno. So today they all come from the Elman family, from the E Group. And then once the IPO has happened, which is now the case, that in the next sort of month or so, this new company Next will then issue shares to Fibra Uno and receive from Fibra Uno all its industrial properties. So there'll be a second stage. And I think this sort of two-stage process was a way of addressing concerns that the tax authority had, which had delayed the IPO in the first place. So you basically have a very clean company today with no debt, relatively small. It just has 9 properties. In fact, they're not really the initial properties. The 9 initial properties are not really nearshoring. They're all logistics around Mexico City. It's about 735,000 square meters initially, but it will more than double once they get the Fibra Uno assets, which will then lead to a much bigger company. And then there will be a third stage, as I understand it, if everything goes according to plan, which, as we know, isn't always the case, where they'll then do a follow-on offering, which will be international. Almost all, if not all, of this offering was sold to locals, mostly Afores. And when that happens, you'll have a much bigger company, billion-dollar follow-on, as it were, much more liquid. So this is really the first stage. And actually, many years ago, I worked on the original Fibra Uno IPO, and it's pretty similar to what happened, which was there was going to be a big IPO, didn't meet the desired demand. It was cut back to basically a local IPO run by Santander at the time. And then they did subsequent kind of follow-ons and brought in international investors and made it the sort of the big, liquid, large, kind of globally attractive REIT, Fibra in Mexico. So they're kind of, not sure it was intentional, but they're following the same kind of playbook that the original Fibra Uno did back in the days.
Interesting, yeah. Maybe it was by accident this time around. Like it was probably the first time as well. We'll have to wait and see how the follow-ons go on. And moving ahead, Damien, if you have nothing else to add, what do you make of this Iberdrola reports that it might be leaving Mexico?
Yeah, I saw yesterday, which is Wednesday, El Confidencial, a Spanish newspaper, reported that Iberdrola has hired Barclays investment bank to sell its last renewable generation assets in Mexico, which are apparently worth about 4 billion euros. And that's about 2,600 megawatts across 6 wind farms, 3 solar plants, and some cogeneration combined cycle plants. The Iberdrola, as it happens, had its quarterly earnings call also on Wednesday. They did not address these rumors. It's a very sort of choreographed call where everyone has to submit their questions beforehand. They did announce and complete a large capital raise of about 5 billion. And they said that all of that money is going to investment in the US and in the UK in very sort of regulated markets. And the fact that Iberdrola had plenty of opportunity to sort of deny this report that then got picked up by everyone, Reuters, Bloomberg, you name it, suggests, and the fact that the report itself is very detailed suggests that there is substance in it, despite the lack of formal confirmation. And this obviously comes after Iberdrola sold the main part of its Mexico business last year for nearly 6 billion euros to private equity funds backed by the Mexican government. So this would be basically they got rid of the non-renewables in a very attractive sell from their perspective. And now they'd be, if this happens, get rid of their renewables. And according to the newspaper report, the original report, one of the reasons they're doing this is that the lack of faith in Mexico's regulatory environment. And clearly Iberdrola had long-term kind of disputes with the AMLO government, which led to the sale last year of the majority of their assets. They had been hit with a huge fine for allegedly selling electricity sort of illegally under the self-supply scheme, and that had sort of raised a lot of red flags and clearly had some political kind of root cause behind it. So it's lack of faith in the Mexican regulatory market. If that's the reason, and if this is confirmed, it doesn't clearly come as a big surprise. And in addition to that, I think that from a corporate point of view, they're pivoting to developed markets, to the UK and in the US, where they see much more regulatory increase, and that was behind the capital increase announcement.
Yeah, I think that it's a black eye for Mexico if it's confirmed, and it's a black eye to the way the government is handling its energy sector, and a black eye to its changes in regulations, and maybe a clear sign that the judicial reform gives little hope to foreign investors to sometimes get a fair dispute resolution mechanism in Mexico. We'll have to wait and see if it's confirmed or not, but it's also not surprising as the way sometimes AMLO referred to Iberdrola when he was president and all the fights that he had with them. We'll see, but it's unfortunate, as we have heard in the podcast before, that the energy sector reforms are sometimes positive, that they are more open to private capital, but this news, if it materializes, raises again questions about whether, even with the new efforts to be more enticing to private money, will they be able to raise the capital Mexico needs to keep its energy sector growing and prosperous? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, because if new players come in and buy these assets, that's $4 billion that could have gone to new capacity, and instead is buying existing capacity. So this is effectively a negative $4 billion investment from Mexico's perspective that is underway. That just makes it a lot more difficult to attract money into greenfield, which is what Mexico really needs. It would be interesting to see if the CFE or the Mexican government, as it did with the original Iberdrola sale, gets involved, because obviously the CFE has these twin objectives of keeping 54% of generation in the government's in their hands, which would require them growing in line with the system, as they're roughly at 54% today, and also separately increasing the share of renewables. So in the total generation of electricity in Mexico. So if they were to get involved and buy some of these assets directly or indirectly, it might help them achieve those twin objectives. But they also need the money, and if they buy existing assets, then that money that could have gone to building new assets and new generation that the country needs will instead go to just buying up old assets and sending money to shareholders of Iberdrola. Not ideal. And I think everyone would agree that this current system, as we heard a couple of weeks ago in one of our previous podcasts, while everyone would agree that things are better now than they were under AMLO, but of course, from the point of view of a global investor, they have to be better than other alternatives, i.e. the US or the UK in the case of Iberdrola. So Mexico isn't just competing against its past, but it's mainly competing against other places where international companies can put their capital to work, and that Mexico has to be as attractive or more attractive than those places, not just more attractive than it used to be a couple of years back.
Right. And moving along, if we're on the energy sector, Damien, Pemex announced, or the Mexico's finance ministry announced a very complex structure to refinance some of Pemex's debts. The details are not out there very much as the amount. I've read that it's about $10 billion, but it's not clear. It's through a trust that it's backed by assets. And I think the news is something that the market was expecting to get a better sense of how Pemex is going to deal with its burgeoning debt. And I guess this is good news for the company. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know how is it going to reduce or not. Maybe it won't reduce the cost of its financial burden. Obviously, these restructures to do that. And I think the missing piece as well, as we will find later on, maybe how this structure works, but the missing piece of it is what is Pemex going to do to try to stem the losses that it's still facing that prevents it from paying its debt or becoming a profitable company that can sustain a certain debt level and not need the help of the Mexican government, as is obviously taking place with this restructuring where the finance ministry is very much involved. So I think the first shoe has fallen. We'll have to wait and see whether the other one comes off as well, and how precisely Pemex benefits from this restructure, and then what it does to avoid its refinancing losses, mainly that is causing a tremendous amount of funds. We haven't seen a clear picture on that end from the current administration.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, Mexico has the economy is big enough and diversified enough to bail out Pemex, right? Pemex debt, roughly speaking, is $100 billion, and that's only about 6 or 7% of Mexico GDP, depending on how you measure it. So, and Mexico's own public sector debt is just a little bit above 50%. So Mexico isn't that levered compared to other countries, and Pemex's debt isn't that big. The problem, as you say, is stemming the operating losses at Pemex that make this an ongoing problem. If you could bail out Pemex once and for all and say, it costs you 7% of GDP, I think everyone would say, where do I sign? But if you have to bail them out every year,
Exactly.
it becomes much more problematic. So there hasn't been any kind of credible plan to turn around Pemex's profitability or lack of profitability. And then until that happens, Pemex is going to be an albatross around, at least around the finance ministry's neck. If it was easy, it would have already been done. The problem is that most of the losses come from refining. This is pre-Dos Bocas. And it's politically very difficult to close down these refineries. And it also goes against the stated goal of being self-sufficient in
energy
or gasoline production. In addition to that, to the losses at refining, the production itself, which is where all the profits come from, is oil production is coming down fast and much faster than costs. So they've got deep operating problems, but at least they're, for now, solving the kind of maturing debt issue at Pemex, even if in effect the federal government is paying for that through this new sort of recap scheme that they've come up with.
Correct. Yeah. I think so. And now some corporate earnings have come out, Damien, right? That you've been looking at the numbers of some of the companies that have reported here?
That's right. So not every company is reported, but at this point, the majority of companies have reported. And say it's sort of a mixed bag. Walmart, the Mexico Walmex, kicked off the earnings season last week and had pretty bad results versus market expectations. That they're generally rising market. The stock's off at one point about 14% just before and after it reported. And there the issue were operating expenses rising much faster than revenues, putting pressure on margins. Walmart has been kind of embracing a lot of different initiatives, mobile phones, health, opening up new distribution centers and so on, which long term I'm sure will generate a lot of value. It's a very disciplined company, but in the short term have put pressure on margins. On the other hand, you've seen some quite strong results. América Móvil, the phone giant, had much better results. Its stock responded very positively, and you're seeing the broadband business do well. They seem to be taking share away from the other broadband players, Televisa or Izzi on the one hand, and on the other hand, Total Play, and their prepaid cellular users also did quite well. So there's an example. Televisa itself, although in absolute terms the numbers looked weak with revenues down and people disconnecting their Sky, generated better than expected cash flow. Was able to deleverage at the Televisa Univision level, and their stock also had pretty big move. Banorte's results were mixed, maybe a little bit lower than than the market expected, with expenses also a bit high, but nothing too worrying. Alsea had great numbers. The stock was up 15% on the day that it reported on Wednesday. Good margins, good sales. So there's an example of a consumer company. There's of course Starbucks and Domino's in Mexico, Latin America, Spain, Portugal, France, and Burger King. And they've they really smashed it. But even Volaris, stock has been very poor in the first half of the year, partly affected by the crackdown on immigration, making people afraid to fly to the US, among other reasons. Also seemed to beat the market and had a slightly better margin and cash flow generation than was expected. So it's a mixed bag. But overall, I think results maybe on average slightly better than expected, with the exception of Walmex. Also, some of the bottlers, Arca and Coca-Cola FEMSA, had slightly weak results. But with the heavyweights such as America Mobile doing well, the market in general is, I think, probably reasonably satisfied with what's happened.
Yeah, it sounds like what we've heard on the economy is being reflected as well with the earnings, in the sense that things were very bleak, and they seem to be less bleak. Not that things are upbeat and that everybody's cheering and happy, but that things are not as bad as probably were anticipated at the very beginning of the year. And now we're seeing some consumers still spending, some companies doing well with consumer spending and things like that. So a mixed bag, and we'll have to wait for the rest of the year to see how it evolves. There are still a lot of pending issues in the macro level, and how they might impact or not the consumer confidence and the investment confidence in the country.
Eduardo, did you see the news out of Nissan? And I think you've been to it in a past life. The CVAC plant in Jutepec, Morelos, is going to be closed by March 2027.
I did see it, and it's been something that's been talked before. And it's not good news, but again, it's, I think, a little bit of the problems that Nice is facing more than Mexico issue element, if I'm correct. What do you think? It's more of that? I mean, it's CVAC and another small company in Aguascalientes that are going to shut down, but the two main ones will be kept running. So I think it's more a internal company issue than a tariff or anything related with the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a mixture of factors, but as we all know, Nissan, which is now headed by a Mexican globally, has been going through severe sort of financial and operating problems or pressures, and they announced that they were going to rationalize their sort of global production and close down the less efficient plants. And obviously, the CVAC plant that's been around forever is being so old is presumably one of the less efficient ones. So no surprise there. I think people might be relieved that the two main plants in Aguascalientes, A1 and A2, are staying, and the Compass plant, which is I think a joint venture between the Infinity model and the Mercedes-Benz GLB, is going to be closed down, and that those joint venture operations will be dissolved. I read in one of the stories that the Chinese, I don't know if this is pure speculation or not, but there was a story that the Chinese might be interested in acquiring either the assets or a combination of the assets and key employees at the CVAC plant. But the local government is definitely going to try and, if they can, sort of shop around that asset to keep the workers employed. And the Chinese, obviously, mostly at this point or exclusively making the cars in China or sending them to Mexico. So if they're looking at some opportunity to increase production in Mexico for the Mexican market, then that could be I guess it could be an opportunity. I don't know if that's just trying to put an optimistic note on what's otherwise a negative development.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit of wishful thinking. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know how many employees, I didn't see how many employees might be laid off, but obviously for government officials, that's not something good. And the private unemployment numbers that Mexico has been putting out have been very, very, very disappointing, with a very low capacity in the first 6 months of the year. So it's not, well, it won't happen immediately, but it's something that will be, doesn't bode well for the administration, either locally or federally.
And actually, probably more worrying are the results from GM and Stellantis, which came out also this week, the second quarter results. GM said in its call that tariffs could cost it $5 billion if they stay in place. And just in the second quarter, they said they spent $1 billion on tariffs. And they export cars from Mexico, Canada, and South Korea. So big part of that $1 billion in the second quarter presumably came from Mexican exports to the US, and clearly that doesn't suggest that that they're going to be investing a lot of money in Mexico if they're paying those kind of tariffs. And then Stellantis also said that tariffs cost about $300 million in the quarter, and that was mainly driven by exports from Mexico and Canada. And Stellantis and, well, above all, GM are amongst the probably two of the sort of 10 biggest companies operating in Mexico in terms of employment and capital deployed. So if those companies are suffering, if their Mexico operations are suffering because of these tariffs, then you might expect a reduction in employment and investment. So the tariffs are beginning to bite. Clearly the US stock markets are all-time highs, but these companies, even though they're huge in terms of capital and employment in the US and in Mexico and Canada for that matter, aren't that relevant to stock markets, which are much more driven by AI and tech. So you can have simultaneously big sectors with lots of workers quite vulnerable and reporting bad numbers, but not affecting the overall indices, because indices are not driven by these factors.
Correct. And I also read, Damien, that with the deal that the US struck with Japan, that GM and Stellantis are very unhappy, because that gives an advantage to the Japanese makers, because they will only pay 15% tariff versus 25% tariff from Mexico and Canada. So I think the tariffs are beginning to bite, and politically probably they will begin to bite as well with the Trump administration. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will eventually invest more in America and forget about emerging economies. But that also comes at a higher cost for these companies. So we'll have to wait and see what the balance is out of the overall change that the Trump administration is doing in the trade, in the global trade system.
And one last question for you. I saw that Trump announced that Coke will switch from high fructose corn syrup to real cane sugar in the US. Coca-Cola hasn't confirmed this. It came from Trump himself. And his inspiration, apparently, according to news stories, there was a big story in the New York Times about it, is Mexican Coke that uses real cane sugar.
Yeah.
So your family at least are Mexican American. Where are you on this? Are you a US Coke drinker, a Mexican Coke drinker? Is your family divided on this?
No, I'm the only one who drinks Coke in this family. I have a very, very healthy family in that sense. Not saying that Coke is an unhealthy product necessarily, but I do like the cane sugar a little bit more. But I can't really tell the difference so much. I do say there is a slight difference with Pepsi more than with Coke. But yeah, I know that traditional Coke drinkers like sugar cane much more. But Coke has been changing in America for many, many years back, I think. No, I think the imports from Mexican Coke became an issue because they were reviving the taste for the old Coke, I guess. And that's what this is bringing up again. It's a funny story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the New York Times story had these Mexican restaurants and bars and corner shops like furious with this change, because right now you get all these people coming to them to buy like traditional Coke, and if traditional Coke is now the only Coke available, there'd be no reason to buy from them, and they're charging them like a couple of bucks a can more to get like traditional Mexican Coke. So that business will go if
I don't know if America can produce so much sugar cane to sweeten all its Cokes. That's another question too. But maybe they will produce more with sugarcane, and the price of those special Cokes will come down.
That's right. I mean, I think like everything with Trump, it's mainly about messaging, and he's sort of sending a message that wants America to return to its core values of sugarcane.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. And he's also in trouble. So a lot of messaging sometimes comes to distract people from the issues that he's facing as well. Well, as a good politician that he is.
Today on the podcast, we're joined by Eduardo Verboonen Khoury. Eduardo is co-president of Hospitales MAC, one of Mexico's fastest growing private hospital groups. How are you, Eduardo?
I'm very good, thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Our pleasure. So Eduardo spent 15, 16 years at MAC, and along the other top executives, he's helped turn the chain into a national leader in Mexico with a vision to bring high quality, affordable healthcare to much of Mexico. In our conversation, we'll talk about the future of healthcare in Mexico, the rise of medical tourism, and how MAC is changing the game for both Mexican and increasingly some international patients. So, Eduardo, I wanted to start off with Hospitales MAC. A lot of Americans won't be that familiar with it. How would you describe the hospital chain, your business model, and what makes it different to private hospitals in the United States?
Thank you so much, Damien. It's a great question. In Hospitales MAC, we strive to make great healthcare at an affordable price, high quality with the best equipment. So the equipment that you would expect in Hospitales MAC is the same equipment as you would expect in the Methodist in Houston, in the medical center. So the same CT scanner that they have, we have. So we focus on three main things: excellence, medical excellence, affordability, and technology. And we excel in all three. And Hospitales MAC are medium-sized hospitals that are located around Mexico. You mentioned that we are the fastest growing hospital network in Mexico. And not just that, we also are the largest network by presence, geographical presence, and by number of units. We have more hospitals in Mexico than any other player. And with those three main things that we focus on, we excel at giving high quality care to our patients and giving them a great experience to tend their medical needs in all around Mexico. Our hospitals are medium size, so you can expect boutique service, a very, very good experience tailor-made to the patient. And we have all the insurance in Mexico work with us, and we have many international insurance, including from the US, Canada, and even from Japan and Europe that we work with. So if I would summarize it in a short sentence, Hospitales MAC is as good as any other hospital in the US, or even better, with 1/20th of the price, and a great experience because there are no waiting lines, there are no queues, everything just works. We strive to make every patient experience a good one.
So how do you achieve that? 1/20th of the cost for the same quality? I mean, apart from paying your doctors and your nurses less, I assume, and paying lower rents, what's the magic solution?
We've become very good at growing our network, and by growing it, you have to really work with your suppliers and your providers. And the negotiations that we have of CT scanners, instead of being one hospital in Mexico and one big hospital in the US that is going to buy one CT scan every 5 years or 10 years, we are buying 10 every year or every 2 years. So our volume negotiation is way better. The prices that we can get from our suppliers is better. And we also give a lot of things a second life. We believe in sustainability. So many places in the US where they discard the beds because there's a broken wheel in the bed, we buy them, and we have a refurbishment center to refurbish. Sorry for repeating myself, to refurbish those beds. So the stuff that doesn't really impact the quality of the care, like a wheel, like a small knob or a stamp, we refurbished. And all of other equipment is new, but as we buy in very, very big volumes, we can get affordable prices. And we pass them along to our patients. We believe in a reasonable profit, but we believe that healthcare is a necessity, and we strive to make it accessible for all.
So I see that, Eduardo, quite a lot of your hospitals, or a few of your hospitals are near the border, like in Chihuahua, in Tijuana, and you also have hospitals in sort of big tourist destinations like Cancun or Merida. How interesting is it to you to bring Americans over the border to get this healthcare at a fraction of the cost in the US?
It's a very good question as well. We have hospitals all around Mexico, from Tijuana to Mérida, as you said. In Los Cabos and in Querétaro, we have Hospitales HMAS is the name. They are very well known and very, very well received and perceived by the American and Canadian communities that are in Los Cabos. And what we have there, it's Accreditation Canada. We are trying to have all of our hospitals with that accreditation in order for the patients to know that it's a very good quality. So if you have Accreditation Canada, then you have international standards that people can relate to. And we started doing that because we started noticing a lot of patients coming to Mexico to get their treatments. And that wasn't expected and wasn't planned, but it's been happening all over our hospitals. Los Cabos has an amazing population of Americans and Canadians that live a big part of the year in Los Cabos, and they trust their health to Hospitales HMAS that we own. And we decided to expand that same level of care to all of our hospitals with Accreditation Canada, and we're doing it greatly. San Miguel de Allende is doing it. Our hospitals in Bajío region are doing it. Our hospitals in Mérida will get it eventually. So we believe that it started out of necessity for some that couldn't afford their treatment in the US. But then when they realized how great of a service was and a fraction of the price, then they started recommending our services to other people. And many, many people are coming from abroad to use our hospitals.
Eduardo, on that sense, are you also trying to get the US government to recognize you so that you could provide the service for Medicare on some of the other social programs that America offers its citizens?
It's a very good question, Eduardo. Not yet. We work with some insurance companies, private insurance companies in the US that already accept our services, and there's no extra pay for the patient, just a regular copay or less copay because it's a fraction of the cost. But we haven't tried to work with the US government. But it's I'm going to write it down in my to-do list.
Another element that has enticed people to come to Mexico is the dental healthcare. Is that part of the services you offer in your hospitals?
They are dentists in our hospitals, but they're most independent professionals. So what we do with our patients is we provide a complete overview of their health, of the hair care needs. And dental is just one part of it. There are many doctors in our hospitals that do dental, and they tend to international patients as well.
Right. So, and what's the mix of patients that you're getting in all your hospitals between locals and foreigners? Can you tell us those percentages?
It depends in the city. Some cities in Mexico are not as common to be visited by international patients, like Aguascalientes or León. Probably not many people visit them as they visit San Miguel de Allende, that is a very known tourist destination. But in all the cities, we've been getting international patients in every one of the cities. Aguascalientes, for instance, is starting a government program to try to propel the Aguascalientes name as a medical tourist destination for patients abroad. So I think many cities are also seeing the opportunity to attract patients that they will come, use hospital services, and then stay in the cities and be tourists in the cities and enjoy the cities. So I think it's been growing, but also some specialties like bariatric surgery has been reducing because alternatives like Ozempic and others similar like them. But many other patients are taking those places. We started to see a lot of OBGYN, a lot of orthopedics, a lot of aesthetic surgery that it's increasing, not only in our hospitals in Tijuana or Mexicali, but all across our 25 hospitals around Mexico.
In terms of the Mexican audience or the Mexican patients, what are you doing to convince people for the healthcare that you're providing and the cost that you were offering them versus some of your rivals?
We've been very fortunate to hit where we were needed. When we started 17 years ago, it was a clear mission of providing great quality care, great quality healthcare with great technology at an affordable price. And who would have known that so many cities needed that? We started in Celaya because of a personal experience of our founder. And then we discovered that Aguascalientes needed the same, and Irapuato needed the same. And everywhere in Mexico, everywhere we go, is the same theme. People need great healthcare at a price that won't break the bank for them. And we've been very well received. We're lucky. It took us 13 years to get up 1 million patient contacts. And now we are doing 1 million in less than a year, every year. So we've been really well received. It's a blast that we can still doing that. We just became the largest hospital network provider in Mexico. That was because a lot of effort from all the team, but also because our business model was needed and was really needed in Mexico.
That was going to be my follow-up question. How much do you attribute the poor quality of public health services in Mexico to the growth of your company?
It's a tricky question to answer because a lot of our patients wouldn't have gone to the public sector in the first place because they have private insurance. So a lot of our patients come with private insurance, even though just a small fraction of the population in Mexico have private insurance policies. A lot of our patients come from them. And also, a lot of patients that went to another hospital, public hospital, or a different brand of hospital, decided to come to us when they learned about our great quality and our affordable prices. So it's a mix of situations that have led to our success.
And in that sense, what are your growth goals for the next years? If you have a
I'm going to tell you a secret, but we need to be in every city that has over 500,000 people living in them. So that's about 50 cities in Mexico that are under those terms. So twice our current size in the following 3 to 5 years. There's a lot of cities in Mexico that are considered small, but they have a population of over 500,000 people. Those cities are going to be our next targets. And we have a great pipeline coming in. We are building a hospital in Saltillo. We are building a hospital in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua.
You got, I think it was $160 million from GA.
Yeah, from General Atlantic.
In 2023. I'm assuming that money is being used for this expansion.
Exactly, yes.
Do you plan to list the company in the stock market at some point in the future?
I wouldn't say no.
Does it depend on any factor like a size or EBITDA margins? Well, margins have come down a bit.
It depends on many things. I think it's about when we are ready. It's something that we look forward to it. I think Mac, it's an amazing company that a lot of people want to invest in it, but we are just not ready to go public just yet.
And is that, just sorry to insist, but is that because of size or because of your governance or because you see great opportunities being a private company and you don't need the money right now?
We don't need the money right now. We're happy with our growth. We think we can accomplish a lot of things before sharing that with other people, other investors that are really looking forward to do it, to investing in us.
Eduardo, in that sense, which is your main competitor that has grown or is trying to grow as fast as you have?
There are no competitors that are trying to grow as fast as we have. We are the youngest hospital network in Mexico, and in just 17 short years, we became the largest player. So there is no other player growing as fast as we are right now.
Los Angeles is not a competitor in that sense, or Star Medica?
They started many years ago. Los Angeles have less hospitals than we do, but they tend to a different kind of demographics than we do.
Correct, more high end.
So we don't really compete with each other. I think we complement each other.
And Star Medica?
Star Medica is the same way. The same way. We compete in some cities. We compete in others. But I don't see other networks as competition, because Mexico is in desperate need of good hospitals. So if we can advance the ecosystem for the betterment of the population, I'll take it.
Right. It's the cake is big enough for everybody to have a party.
Exactly.
In that sense. Without a doubt, your business model has proven that the sector is profitable, has market growth potential. It just needs special sauce that you described at the very beginning on how to accomplish lower costs and efficiencies that others haven't, or will try to if they imitate what you've done so far.
Yeah, one of our other advantages is our technological systems, and as a standpoint, they help us be really efficient operationally, so we can offer better prices too. So everything we do has to be done with that in mind, that we have to be affordable, that we have to be great quality and great experience. So even when we design our hospitals, we design the hospitals to be easy to operate, to use the better trajectories for the cables in the construction, so we don't overuse materials, because everything that you put on top of it, every expense that you make, it's going to it's going to have an impact on someone. So if we can keep our costs down, then we can pass along that great price to our patients.
And in the technology sense, I get the sense that you might also have all your hospitals connected via a network.
We are in a process we have them connected, but we are improving that. We have a plan that is called Transforma, that we are going to rise the bar 10x to all of the other hospitals systems, not only in Mexico, but in Latin America. And we are becoming a really great network, expanding network, that we're going to be able to have all the patient can be able to be in Merida one day and then fly to Tampico the next day and continue their treatment as if it was in the same city. That's a project that we're investing around $20 million in the following 3 years. That's going to propel us to the next level.
On that sense, what about artificial intelligence? Is that something that will also transform the services or even the way doctors attend patients in the future?
We already use them. We are very proud of being innovative, but we are very risk adverse when it tends to the patients. So everything we do with the patient's health, we are very risk averse. We like high quality, and we don't complicate it too much. But we already use artificial intelligence to help the doctors in every one of our new CAT labs has artificial intelligence. So the doctor is advised of how much radiation, how much exposure, how much contrast should they use for that patient, and it's automated by artificial intelligence, so the patient can have a better outcome, and the doctor can focus on tending the patient, not thinking about how many milligrams I have to use. That's been automated by artificial intelligence. We also have every X-ray that is taken in the thorax for patients goes automatically to an artificial intelligence system to look for cancers. So if somebody was to go because they got hit or they have a broken bone and they take an X-ray, it will be automatically processed for different types of cancer that will be flagged, and our doctors then will take a deeper look at it. So we are using it in many ways to improve the patient's outcomes, but we are using it a lot for our internal processes to make it even more efficient. And all those efficiencies we can pass along for our patients.
The human touch is still there.
Yes, of course. That's the most important part. All of our systems are for the improvement of the health of our patients and the easier of the work for the doctors. So they can really focus on the patient and not be focusing on filling up paperwork at a tablet form.
Damien, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to ask Eduardo.
How does the government, we obviously have a left-wing government in Mexico, have had one now for 7 years or so. How do they see the role of the private sector? Are they pretty supportive because it takes some of the pressure off the government, the state-run health system? Or do they see it as something that is benefiting the elite and needs to be curbed?
No, I think they see us as a very beneficial part of the system. Even in COVID, there was a program that the government built to surrogate some of their patients to private hospitals. We were one of the few that signed up for that program, and we tend to government patients, and we partner and we helped during the crisis to help all those patients that couldn't be tended in public hospitals. So I think they see us as a good part of the ecosystem.
One last question. We don't see a lot of medical related companies, hospitals in the stock market in Latin America. You have Médico Sur, which basically is just one hospital. It used to have pharmacies that they sold, or they spun off and then they sold, and they're never able to grow. And obviously, Angeles Group is private. Auna, I think they have 3 hospitals in Monterrey, but Auna has been a bit of a disappointment since it listed in the New York stock market. I mean, obviously they're in South America as well. Why do you think hospitals have struggled to attract interest from institutional investors or struggled to be represented in the capital markets?
That's a very good question that I don't have a clear answer to. I see a lot of Brazilian hospitals in the stock market and Brazilian stock market. They are very successful. They're great IPOs. I see Auna that I believe that they are going to do great things. I know Suso, and I think they are doing amazing things in regards to cancer care. I believe then there will be us, and the excitement will come to the public market when we're ready.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Eduardo. That was great to hear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eduardo.
And thank you to all your audience.
Damien, I think that wraps it up for us today. Thank you for listening. Hope you join us next week. And don't forget to subscribe. Let me share a quick reflection. In the early 2000s, Nokia led the mobile market, but it fell fast, unable to adapt to the smartphone revolution. The lesson? Without vision and reinvention, even giants can fall. Now think about this. Where will your company be a year from now if you adopt AI today? At MexMoves, we're seeing real examples. Mexican companies combining their data with top AI models and getting results. A big consumer goods firm is saving hundreds of hours by automating orders and stock planning. A well-known retailer now uses AI agents as control towers, generating reports across all its stores and warehouses. What do they have in common? Arcam, a Mexican-built AI and data platform developed by a world-class team. Imagine a ChatGPT-style tool trained on your company's data. Fast, accurate, reliable. That's what Arcam delivers. Data integration, decision-making with real metrics, and tailored AI for real operational solutions. What would Nokia's story be with a tool like this? More importantly, what will your company's story be if you adopt AI today? Request your demo at arcam.tech/whitepaper.